Welcome back to the second installment of my top 10 players of 2017. This is going to be Fairy Peak at number 9, and just before I get started on this one, I'll answer a question that I spotted in the last video. No, I am not going to be talking about the gameplay because I don't know what the gameplay is. I'm recording this without looking at the gameplay. That's just going to be added to the final video, so you guys have got some gameplay to watch from the player that I am going to be talking about. So, no, I won't be talking about the gameplay, and if I ignore a crazy goal, that is why. But without further ado, let's move on and talk about Fairy Peak's 2017, excuse me. A player who had a very, very interesting 2017, mainly because it's easy to forget, but this was his debut year. He started off the year with Mocket alongside Mystic and K-Dop, and that was the first that we'd seen from him in the 3v3 setting at the highest level. So debut player. It's so easy to forget that because he's had such a storied 2017 and it feels like he's been around forever. But 2017 is the only year that he has won any prize money in Rocket League. 2017 is where he really popped up in the scene and started playing at the highest level, and he's already, in my opinion, a top 10 player. You know, by the end of the year when all is said and done. Another thing that I really need to quickly clarify is this list isn't my, current top 10 players in the world. That's not what we're trying to do here, just in case there was any confusion from the last video. If I was going to put my, make a video series for my top 10 players in the world, it would look very different from my top 10 players of 2017. This is more looking at the accomplishments of players, what they were able to achieve in 2017 as a whole. Compare everybody in that regard. But yeah, we might do that in the future, my top 10 players, and I'm sure it would look very different because results based. We're going to be seeing a lot of players from teams that did well, and players that perhaps had a great year performance wise but weren't able to get those results. They're not going to be on a list like this. But yeah, that's the last thing I need to mention before we get into the Fairy Peak shenanigans. One of the players who has changed his car throughout the year. He started off as an Octane and now in Batmobile, then back to Octane, now Batmobile again. I think most recently I spotted him in the Octane at E-League, so he's very accomplished with both those cars, which is very interesting. It's a good thing to be able to switch between the two if you're having a bad day on one, so credit to him in that regard. But obviously that's not going to be one of the categories that puts him higher or lower than my top 10. We are going to go and need to look at the results that he had in 2017 as a whole, first of all. And we have to go all the way back. For Gimmick, number 10, we didn't have to do this because he didn't start off his 2017 at RLCS Season 3. He started at X Games, but Fairy Peak did start at Season 3 online with Mocket, like I said, with alongside Mystic and K-Dop. And it's easy to forget, but they were the #1 team in Europe going into that Season 3 LAN finals, seed-wise. They took down GFE, which at that time was Pashi, Violent Panda, and Chaussette. Three players who are now doing great on their respective teams. And they also took down Northern Gaming, who has since changed organizations to Envy, but that was Devo, Remco, and Maestro at the time. Of course, it since dropped Maestro, picked up Greasy, but all these names should be familiar to you guys who are keeping up with the Rocket League scene at the highest level. And to finish off that playoff run, they took down Flipside Tactics, Marky Duda, Greasy, and Guxer 4-2. So #1 seed going into RLCS Season 4, taking down all 3 of their biggest rivals. Well, actually, maybe not all 3 of their biggest rivals, because Leftovers were also in there, but definitely 3 of their biggest rivals, back to back to back. Phenomenal result. Their noteworthy results at the LAN. I'm not going to be including all the results at the LAN because I think some of the results against some of the teams at Season 3 weren't really that important, just because we would absolutely expect a team of Mocket's caliber and a team of Fairy Peak, K-Dop, and Mystic at the time to just dominate in certain matchups. But they did take down NRG 4-3 in the winners finals. That's, I think, the first and the most important result that they had at that whole tournament. Unfortunately, they weren't able to take the W in the grand finals because they lost back-to-back to Northern Gaming, who had subbed in Turbo Pulsar instead of Maestro, who couldn't attend the LAN. So Devo, Remco, Turbo Pulsar beat them 4-2 in the first best of 7, and then 4-3 in the second best of 7. But Mocket in that second best of 7 were on match point after game 5. They were leading 3-2. So Fairy Peak in his debut year in his debut LAN was 1 game away from taking an RLCS title twice, and just weren't able to do it. So it's a shame that shame for Mystic, K-Dop, and Fairy at that time. But big congrats to Devo, Turbo, and Remco, of course, for that accomplishment. But yeah, we have to just really put that in the right perspective. That was not a Fairy Peak who was proven at LAN playing at that tournament. That was not Fairy Peak, who was a veteran of the scene. That is still pretty much debut season Fairy Peak, debut performances Fairy Peak, showing up and playing phenomenal. So that's the first thing that's noteworthy for this guy and why I put him on my top 10. The second thing is that he's had success with multiple different lineups. He finished up season 3 with Mystic and K-Dop, and straight away for DreamHack Atlanta, that was the next big tournament that he played, he's playing with Pashi and Freaky, who are now they're still his teammates to this day. But they didn't start off very well. They lost that tournament 3-0 to NRG and 3-0 to Northern Gaming, so not looking great for Fairy Peak and for Mocket, or the new Mocket roster. He's the only player who stayed in that Mocket roster. And it didn't pick up either in the Universal Open 2v2, where he played with Pashi. They lost to DapG 2-1, that's Dapper and Garrett, and they beat Marky Duda Cuxer 2-1, but then lost to Sizz and Jacob 2-0 to finish 4th at the Universal Open. So again, respectable result, but overall I'd say a failure for these guys, because their only matches against top teams, they lost 2 of them out of 3, so not a great tournament. As far as RLCS Season 4 goes, they did alright, but coming into playoffs with the 5th seed, I think it was, or no wait, were they 4th seed? I'm blanking, but I think whatever seed they came in as, it was definitely 4th seed, yeah. They managed to take down Excel before losing to Method, and then reverse sweeping PSG, the mad reverse sweep, the 7-game reverse sweep over PSG to take 3rd seed going into the LAN. So I would say a successful playoffs for Mocket, just because most people thought they were going to finish that 4th, if anything, and beating PSG is a huge result for them. But then the RLCS LAN didn't go too well either. They lost to Ghost 3-2, and then they lost to G2 3-2, so struggling against NA competition still, as that was their 3rd loss in a row in 3v3 against top North American teams. First NRG at DreamHack Atlanta, then Ghost and G2 at the RLCS Season 4 LAN. Throw in, the loss to DapG and SUC, or I don't know what to call this, Sizzle Your Cob. I almost said a completely different word there, but throw those 2v2 losses in, and they're not doing very well against North American competition, which is historically not how it's gone at RLCS between EU and NA. But they finished off so strong. I wasn't going to put Fairy in my top 10, but their E-League turned it around for me, because 3-0 over Method, 3-2 over Cloud9 reverse sweep, and then 3-2 over PSG, another reverse sweep. That is an incredible run of form for Fairy Peak alongside Pashi and Freaky, and just enough to bump Fairy into the top 10, in my opinion. Of course, they weren't able to go any further than that, as they lost to the eventual winners G2 in the semi-final 4-1, and that for me is the comprehensive list of Fairy Peak's noteworthy results in 2017. His total win-loss comes 9 wins, 10 losses, which is worse than Gimmick, who I put at number 10. But one of the reasons why I have Fairy Peak above Gimmick in my list is he won $30,761 of prize money, so a little bit more than Gimmick in that list. I think he if I've done my calculation correctly, was the 8th highest earner, or was it 9th? No, 8th highest earner of 2017. Gimmick, I think, at 15th. So even though he only won a $3,000 more, he was able to be significantly higher in the standings, prize money wise, and the fact that he was able to succeed on 2 separate teams, also have a phenomenal start to his debut LAN. That's one thing that is very similar between Gimmick and Fairy, is they both really showed up to their first LAN and performed very well. Going 1 game away from an RLCS victory in your first LAN, that's pretty good. So I think Fairy Peak, one of the most successful players of 2017, absolutely no doubt about it. And of course, I did mention in my previous video, the number 10 Gimmick video, that I would be adding a little bit of subjective ratings to this, and if we look at Mocket as a whole and who the outstanding performer is for them, I don't think anybody would argue that Fairy Peak is the MVP for them at the moment, and his individual contributions have been incredible at times. The plays that this guy is able to pull out are just phenomenal, and he's just such a fun player to watch, such a mechanically gifted player. So certainly want to continue watching into 2018. I'm expecting great things from him, And, you know, not just in the 3v3 scene, also in the 1v1 scene. We'll have to keep an eye out for him in that as well, because he's constantly high rated in 1v1s and taking show matches off, you know, a lot of the top players in the world, like Scrub, K-Dop, Devo. And we're still waiting on that rematch with Cuxer. But yeah, Fairy Peak, I didn't use 1v1 to rank him 9th. I think like 3v3, purely 3v3 alone, and a little bit of Universal Open 2v2 action is all that was needed to get him solid at number 9 in this list, and that's where I've got him. Hopefully, you know, you guys take a good look at him, because he's a super exciting player. Also, one of the highest, like, I've almost split this list 50-50, I think, if I remember correctly. So he's, in my opinion, certainly top 5 EU for 2017 as well. But that's going to be it for him. I hope I didn't forget to say anything important. Let me just really quickly look at my notes in case I blanked on something. Yeah, success in multiple lineups. Oh yeah, I knew there was something else. I can my sixth sense. I've got a sixth sense. I'll tell you guys what it is. Like, we're finishing this video in a minute, but let me tell you what my sixth sense is. When I know I've forgotten something, or you know, when I've forgotten something, I know I've forgotten something, even if I can't remember what it is I've forgotten. And I knew that I'd forgotten something, but the one thing that we need to mention about Fairy Peak is he's the only player on my top 10 list. Hopefully this isn't too much of a spoiler, but he's the only player on my top 10 list who didn't get a major LAN win. So that's another bit of interesting trivia for you. But you know, came pretty close to RLCS Season 3. But yeah, that's it. That's everything I wanted to say about this guy. Huge performance in 2017. Looking for big things in 2018. But yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow for my number 8 of the top 10. Until then, thanks for watching and have a good day.